Hi everyone, I hope that you are well and that you are enjoying what should be June by the time this is out. That will mean it is Pride Month. That will mean we've probably seen a lot of prideful declarations by the likes of Raytheon and Esso and other wonderful conglomerates talking about how they are pro-LGBT, but they'll only be putting those messages in the Twitter feeds of their European or North American subsidiaries, certainly not in their Middle Eastern versions. Don't you just love rainbow capitalism, ladies and gentlemen? It's fantastic. Anyway, so I'll get off my soapbox there and just get on with things. So yes, I hope that you are well and that your June is everything that you wished it to be. Thanks again to my hopefully one solitary subscriber. I say hopefully in so far that I hope they haven't left me. Maybe others have joined them. I don't know. We will see. But for those of you who are fresh and new to this channel, hello, welcome. My name is Andy, plus apparently neighbours' dogs if you can hear the barking. I am a middle-aged trans woman and I'm using this space to kind of talk about any kind of nonsense that comes into my head, and maybe you can listen along and learn something or gain something or I don't know, whatever, find me incredibly frustrating and annoying and hate watch the hell out of my videos. If you are here hate watching me, hello. I hope that this will give you something interesting to watch as well. Thank you for sticking around and upping my algorithm or whatever, I don't know. Anyway, what am I talking about? So today, yes. So I wanted to, Jesus, these dogs. So I just wanted to develop something further that I talked about in my last video, which I actually recorded about 10 minutes ago. That's why it's still kind of fresh in my head. And I talked a bit about the kind of concrete reality that coming out meant to me. And I would imagine that a lot of people share these kinds of sentiments. Maybe not, I don't know, but I suspect it's true, because there is something incredibly final about coming out. It's, for me, it was the difference between being able to live in this fantasy, but in a fantasy world that was kind of horrible, and moving into, moving past the fear of bringing that into reality, which could just make things worse. And if you've seen my previous video, you'll see those fears were pretty much unfounded. The people that I've come out to have all been, by and large, fantastic. We'll see how that goes. I still have a few people that I still need to have a conversation with, but I have no trepidation whatsoever. If it goes well, it goes well. If it goes badly, it goes badly. C'est la vie. But anyway, I want to talk a little bit more about that kind of, what would you call it, the doorway from one space to the other. I don't know, maybe in a way, because I overthink stuff all the time. I'm terrible for it. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to create this whole sort of world just within my head, and then this world somehow is also a reality, even though it's a fantasy, but the reality is somehow worse than the world, so we can't possibly bring that into the outside. You know what I mean? It's crazy. So what coming out represented for me was the kind of the crossing of the Rubicon from the dream, from the fantasy, into the cold, hard, real physical world. And I think, as I said in my previous video, once you've had that conversation, there is no taking that back. There is no step backwards, at least for me. I knew that when I started coming out, that would be it. That would be it. And I wasn't wrong. Like, when I came out to a few people, it was like a drug. It was such an amazing experience. As I said just before, equal parts terrifying, exhilarating, but also such an emotional release of pleasure and joy. Um, why would I not want to experience that again? It was incredible. And the other thing that I found was that people would often, on the one hand, surprise me with some of the questions that they'd ask or the things that they'd say. So, for example, one of the last people that I spoke to, that I came out to, um, she she seemed to be convinced that I would somehow magically know the words for all of the different types of shoes, which is peculiar. But she also offered to help me with my makeup, which was incredibly touching. I think sometimes people are just a little bit kind of like taken aback and they're not quite sure how to process it. And so it's interesting sometimes just watching that thought process play out in real time. Because, I mean, I'd been having this conversation for like decades. You know, I'd been telling people this in my mind. I'd been having this conversation in my mind. I'd been playing out all the different scenarios in my mind. So I was ready, I was prepared. But for the people that I was talking to, it was like, you could see that they needed a few seconds to first of all process that, and then to turn that process into a coherent response. But also, you know, they knew they needed to combine that with a sense of showing me support and love. And it's such a cognitive load that I'd placed on their shoulders. Like, I can only be forgiving of people if in those first few minutes of learning about this, a little bit of space just to kind of process that, a bit of silence. There's no harm in that, because it is perhaps something that's quite difficult for people to hear. Not difficult in the sense that it represents bad news or something negative, but it's, I think for a lot of people, it was kind of unexpected. It was kind of unexpected maybe that it was me, that it was this particular conversation that we were having it in. So yeah, it's interesting to watch that play out. And as I said in the other video, you know, I'm super proud and grateful and privileged that a lot of those conversations have played out in a very positive way, where people have been able to sort of come around from that initial shock to, you know, turning that into a very, very meaningful and a very wonderful conversation where we get to talk honestly, maybe even for the first time, about who I am and where they fall into my life and where I fall into theirs going forward. It's an interesting, not renegotiation of that relationship, but it's a reformulation, let's say, or the start of a reformulation at the very least, because, you know, that it's that conversation isn't the start and the end of that process. It's the start of that process. And for me, I think I might have mentioned this in the kind of what does transformation what does this process mean to me? What is all of this? And transitioning isn't just a process where I'm slowly going through these physical changes, but it's also a way for me to help everybody around me, and for them to help me as well, slowly go through this process of me becoming the person that they knew me as to the person they will know me as. So it's quite a beautiful thing in a way. And again, it kind of draws on what I was saying in my last video about how much I enjoy the coming out process. But yeah, anyway, coming back to the sort of that sense of permanence about the whole thing, I think that's probably what drew me to need to start coming out in the first place, because it was a change that I knew I needed to make. It was a change that I just couldn't exist in that past form anymore. I just couldn't. I couldn't grow old as a male. I couldn't grow into being an old man. I couldn't die as an old man, because that is unacceptable. I could no longer look in the mirror and see who I was. I couldn't continue to try falling asleep. I'm pointing down because that's where my bed is. I couldn't continue to try falling asleep every night wishing that I would wake up in the body of a woman. I couldn't live in that fantasy land anymore. I needed to bring that into reality. I needed to make my dreams come true. Is essentially what I'm saying. And the only way that I could make that happen was taking that step. Is breaking through that barrier and bringing those dreams into reality and just not caring what would happen next. The permanence was the point of it, I think. Another thing that kind of like doesn't trouble me, it plays on my mind when I think about coming out, and I think it's something that like a friend of mine was talking about like a while ago, when maybe even when I first came out to her. I can't remember exactly, my memory is awful, but there was this notion that like you have to always be coming out in a way, and that's, you know, that really struck me as being true. Maybe it's going to be less of an issue for me as I start presenting more and more female. And, you know, there's going to be like this awkward phase where, you know, I'm kind of like in that weird state where it's not, you know, I'm not female enough to be passing 100% as female, but I'm not male either. So it's that kind of uncanny valley between the two spaces. That's inevitable and that's fine, but I'm going to have to consciously decide who I do and don't come out to, who does and doesn't deserve that conversation. And in a way, it's interesting because it makes me it does make me evaluate to a certain extent the relationships that I have with other people. Who are those who deserve to have this conversation? Who do I need to have this conversation with? Because I have to. It's just something I have to do. I don't necessarily want to do it with some people, but I'm going to have to. And I'm putting those conversations off because I can imagine they're going to be quite unpleasant, but maybe less unpleasant than I think. But who are the people that I really want to come out to? Because I just want to share this experience with them. I want to share this journey with them, and I want to share that as early as possible because I really want them to experience that with me. And in a way, it's like I'm kind of, you know, there's this sort of, I don't know, there's a kind of guilt, which I think I'm pretty over these days, but I think there is that residual guilt that, oh, you're imposing this on other people, you're forcing them to kind of experience this with you. It's like it's an obligation, it's something they didn't ask for. But you know what, like, I guess they'll just have to get over it. I guess, like, if they're my friend, if they love me, if they're my family, I would want to do this for another friend. I would want to do this for my kids, my grandkids, my whoever it would be in my family. I would want to experience that with them because I want to give them that support. So I don't know if I agree now at this point in my journey that it is something that I should have been feeling guilty over. But I do know that a lot of people feel guilty about this kind of imposition. Because I mean, going back to what I was just saying about that kind of cognitive load that I placed on people by coming out. In a way, you could argue that this is a sort of an imposition. This is that kind of emotional damage, right, that you're causing to others. But at the same time, as I said in my last video, people can see the joy in that. People can see that there are positives to come out from that honesty. You know, and I think there's one thing that I just want to end on with this thought, and just to give a little bit more of a flavour about kind of who I am and where I'm coming from. I've worked in education basically all of my career, and there's this kind of idea, I think a lot of teachers have this, maybe at least in the area that I work in, that you need to make your classroom this incredibly positive, sort of upbeat space where only positive vibes are allowed, right? This kind of edutainment almost sense. And actually, I've seen lessons where negative emotions have been, I use the word transformative a lot, I think, but it has created this sort of very resonant, transformative experience for the students in that class. It's obviously going to be incredibly memorable for them. And it's like, that's obviously incredibly powerful. That lesson has reached those students in a way that perhaps if you were just sticking to like fun times and jokes and stuff, it wouldn't have done. It's allowed students to be honest with each other, and it's really developed that relationship. It's built that bond between them so much more than just that constant churn of like ha ha he nonsense, right? And it made me think when I was watching those lessons that actually maybe we don't need to shy away from being constantly upbeat and positive about stuff. Maybe there is something incredibly powerful about appropriate use of not negativity for negativity's sake, but not shying away from embracing the bad stuff, like being able to unpack that, to look at it, evaluate it in a way that you're not going to be afraid of. I think there's something really powerful there, and this is something that I've been able to explore with some of the people that I've been coming out with, you know, really sort of tapping into the elements of my past, of our past, where, you know, this is something that we can build on, this is something that we can improve on, this is something that we can develop, and we can do that together. And that's, you know, I think that's powerful. I think that's great. So that's my thoughts. I don't know. This is a bit of a two-parter on the coming out kind of process, and maybe I'm overthinking it. I don't know. But I mean, what do you think? Like solitary viewer, my single watcher, whoever you are in the world, you know, let me know. Comment down below. I finished the last video by saying that I hope that if you are watching this and you need a little bit more kind of positive energy to get you along the process, maybe you want a bit of positivity in terms of coming out, if you want some extra motivation, and again, maybe this is something you needed to hear today. I don't know. I hope so. I mean, I'm kind of making these videos for myself to a certain extent. I don't expect these to get like hundreds of views. Like dozens would be nice. But ultimately, I don't really care if people watch these videos or not. But if one person in the world gets something from these videos, if you see this and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna have that conversation tomorrow, let me know, because that would be amazing. That would make, I mean, it wouldn't make it all worthwhile. Like, as I say, I think I found this process so great for me. That's great. But if you could also benefit from this, I would love that. I would love to hear that. So please let me know. Also, if you hate watching this and you think this is cringe and awful and terrible, whatever, let me know. You'd have to work hard to kind of upset and offend me. So why not? Let me know. Whatever. But thank you very much for sticking it out. Thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate it. I wish that you have a great June, a great rest of the year. And I will see you again soon. Take care. Goodbye.